So you have learned how to declare and initialize a variable. Now you might be wondering, what are the kind of values that we can assign to a variable? Well, you have seen strings, but we have more types. Basically, in JavaScript, we have two categories of types. On one side, we have primitives, also called value types. On the other types, we have reference types. In this lecture, we're going to focus on primitives, and you're going to learn about reference types later in the course. Now, in the category of primitives, we have strings, numbers, booleans, undefined, and null. Let's look at each of these in action. So here we have a variable called name, which is set to a string. What we have here is what we call a string literal. That's just a fancy name for a string. Now let's declare a variable and set it to a number. So let age, we set that to 30. And by the way, I'm not 30 years old, but don't tell anyone, okay? So this is what we call a number literal. Now let's declare a boolean. A boolean can be either true or false. So let is approved to be true. This is what we call a boolean literal. And we use this in situations where we want to have some logic. For example, if the order is approved, then it needs to be shipped. So the value of a boolean variable can be true or false. And by the way, note that both true and false are reserved keywords, so they cannot be variable names. Okay? Now you have seen undefined before, so I can declare another variable, first name. If we don't initialize it, by default, its value is undefined. But we can also explicitly set this to undefined. But that's not very common. In contrast, we have another keyword that is null. So let me declare another variable and set this to null. We use null in situations where we want to explicitly clear the value of a variable. For example, we may want to present the user with a list of colors. If the user has no selection, we want to set the selected color variable to null. In the future, if the user selects a color, then we're going to reassign this variable to a color like red. And then if they click red again, perhaps we want to remove the selection, so we set this back to null. So we use null in situations where we want to clear the value of a variable. So these are the examples of primitives or value types. We have strings, numbers, booleans, undefined, and null. Now in ES6, we have another primitive that is symbol, and you're going to learn about that later in the course.